All right. Welcome everybody who's going to see this later on. Um, my name is Stacy Dyson. I am the head of Tesoro, which is an international women's network dedicated to creating, maintaining, and providing safe spaces for women who work in words to do their work. This is kind of the beginning of our Aperitif concerts for this season. And I am so thrilled. I cannot tell y'all. I've been waiting to get this woman on screen and on the mic for a minute. I say this about everybody, and it's always true. We are blessed to have us joining today, Cathy Carson. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of her biography. I'm going to let her do that for me. So, Cathy, fantastic to have you here.
Thank
Tell
you
us how
so
you're
much.
doing, first of all. You
So
doing okay?
yeah, I am really delighted to be here. I really am. Thank you so much for having me, Stacey. As you say, it's been a while in the making, but we're here today.
So give us a little thumbnail biography here.
So I guess I first thing to say is that I'm not a writer by trade. I'm a cancer nurse by trade. That would be my day job. I usually write poetry and a little bit of flash fiction. And just this last 2 years, I wrote a one-woman show, which is a combination of poetry and storytelling. And I've been chairing that in the last 2 years, up and down the UK and up and down Ireland. And yeah, really, really enjoying it and pushing it forward. And yeah, I'm just growing and learning a very steep learning curve and loving all the way.
So I'm going to start the official interview by asking you the question that I ask everybody who does this show for us. Why poetry and why now? And you can interpret that any way you want to.
Okay. Why poetry? Because I struggle to express myself, as you can probably see. I'm not very eloquent in conversation. I would struggle with shyness. I struggle with social anxiety. And so poetry is a way for me to craft very precise, exact language to communicate what it is I'm feeling or what it is I want to say. And so for me, there has been incredible freedom since I started performing about 5 or 6 years ago, in just being able to have that freedom of knowing exactly what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, and with the show, even how I'm going to stand, where I'm going to move. There's such freedom and liberation in that for me. I don't have the white noise of worrying about what I sound like or what I'm going to say next. So for me, the poetry has been really freeing in finding my voice, really, and allowing me to step into spaces that I wouldn't normally step into because the shyness and the social anxiety would have held me back. So I suppose for me, it's an avenue to open up a world that I wouldn't have ventured into. So I've just been exploring that through lockdown even more, just stepping into Zoom spaces as well. And then when the lockdown was lifted, just really pushing myself to travel on my own, which I'd never done, and just to go and meet people and go to theaters and having to engage with people. So it's been a real steep learning curve for me in learning how to capture my voice. And sometimes Danielle, the character in the story, is a really assertive character. Sometimes when I've got to do something that I don't feel very sure in, I kind of step into her and I say, right, Danielle, let's go, you're taking this. And so she takes that for me and helps me to be more assertive in that role.
So you say you started this just a little while ago, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, when you were, just a little bit of a thing.
yeah.
Did this cross your mind? Or was there
So
something
I've
else that
always
entertained
written.
your
I've
okay?
always written, Stacey. I've always written, even as a child. And I remember two things that stand out from my childhood. One is that in school, remember being 7 years old, we had to write a story, and then the teacher would make corrections on the story, and we had to put it into our good jotter, our good book, and write it out nice and neat. And I remember not writing out the same story. I remember finding that really boring and wanting to create a whole new story. And I used to get in trouble because she'd say, "That's not the story that you gave me 5 minutes ago, but it's a new story." And I would just get so frustrated with wanting to be creative. And the other thing is that whenever we went to gym class, I would always forget my kit, because the punishment for forgetting your kit was that you had to write a story. And so I never went to gym class. So it's
Love it.
something that I've always enjoyed. It's something that I've always done. And there's always been a freedom of expression in crafting and writing for me.
So when you're not writing and you're not performing and you're not
Mhm.
doing your day job,
Mhm.
okay, as what do you do? You just, I'd sleep personally with your schedule, but what do you do to decompress, basically?
What do
Or
I do?
can you?
Yeah, I can. I'm really lucky. I have a really good husband, and I have a little dog. And yeah, I go for walks for dogs. I'm really lucky. I don't have a large family, and with family dynamics have been difficult all my life. But I have what I call a family of friends, and so I have really good support. And so I always have someone sort of on standby to go for a coffee with, or go for a walk with, or a chat. I'm really thankful for the friendship circle that I have. So they are a big part in helping me decompress and helping me just to let go and be myself and just relax. Yeah.
Huh?
I don't do any
Tell
other
me,
hobbies creative though.
no,
No.
really?
No. No.
Well,
I used to
well,
dance. When I was younger, I used
I
to
was just
dance. I
about to
used to,
ask.
yeah. So when I was younger, I used to break dance. So before I found my voice, that was always a freedom of expression for me. I used to love
All
just
of the
letting
things
go
in
of
the
the music.
world you could have said. Breakdancing was not
Yeah,
anywhere in my head.
yeah.
Okay, okay,
Back in the 80s, back a long time ago.
okay. Um, Talk to me about, just kind of leading off that, talk to me about music. Where
Gosh, my
does
dad
music
was a
fit?
fantastic musician. So I grew up with music. Um, my dad, for all his faults, my dad struggled with alcoholism and struggled then with violence because of that. And so my family dynamic was never very good. But my dad was an amazing musician, and I have to stand in the truth of that. So he raised me with music, and he raised me with a love of music and created that in me. And I never played an instrument. He tried to teach me, and I never was able to pick it up. He was an amazing guitarist. And so we were brought up with Eric Clapton and those types of bands. And my mum would always have played the Beatles and the Kinks back in the 70s as well. So we were brought up with that kind of music. Um, so I guess breakdance music was a way of rebellion against him, because he hated that type of music. He hated R&B. He hated hip hop. To him, he didn't see that as a music that he appreciated. And so when I got into music, I wanted to do something that was completely different from him. And so I kind of went to that. But yeah, he did give me a love of music, definitely. Yeah.
I know you said that you've been traveling. Well, I know anyway, even if you hadn't said it, you've been traveling a lot,
Mhm.
all over um, Ireland, certainly. What about further afield, like over here? I would love to see
Never
you bring your
been.
show over here.
I've never been over there. I've never been over there. So yeah, I have just been touring it around the UK. If the opportunity arose, who knows? But I haven't had the chance to get over there. And it's just as well, Stacey. All of us and most of us are doing this along with a day job, and so it's getting time freed up to travel. If I'm going across to England, I can go over a night, do the show, and come back the next day. So it's just sometimes just a whistle stop jump across to do that in the mainland UK from Ireland. But to go to America would be something very different
We'll write a grant. We'll get you over here.
now.
Or I'll marry a millionaire with a bad heart and a will to sin. One or the other. We'll work on it. Backup plan. Talk to me a little bit. I mean, I know that folks on that side of the big pond know about Becoming Marvelous, but for our
Mhm.
folks over here who don't know, or the folks over on your side who are living under a rock or in a cave,
Okay.
I see when you first started it, I saw announcements of this and reviews of this all over place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And talk to me about, give me a little bit about the play, and then talk to me about your reaction to all of this fame, basically, because that's what it is.
Gosh. So Becoming Marvelous is the story of a young girl called Danielle who grows up in the Troubles in Belfast, so technically in the 70s. And she gets followed from age 5, we start her journey, and we follow her right through to age 29. So she struggles at home. I mean, some of it is my story, and some of it is imagination, and some of it is just pulled from the air and pulled from other people's stories. But she does struggle with alcoholism from her father and violence in the home. And there are a number of people in her life who try to intervene and try to help her. But because of her anger and her resentment and where she is emotionally, she finds it really hard to attach to people. So we find that she is expelled from school, thrown out of school at 15 because of her behaviour. At 20, there is a violent interaction with her dad that means that she ends up in hospital that night. And a nurse tries to intervene and to get her into a safe place. But the safe place is full of drunk men. And so she doesn't stay there. And she takes herself to the streets. And then we watch her journey through the streets and try to rebuild her life. And we follow her right through, and all the people that sort of intervene and help her. And we watch her change and move past her trauma and her difficulty with trusting people until she's able to accept that help and get back on her feet again. So it's a story of redemption, really. She does become marvelous in the end. And the Becoming Marvelous title comes from an elderly gentleman that she meets in a care home who calls her Young Marvelous. And so she becomes marvelous in the end. And so it's quite a triumphant tale. It's a tough story, but I love the climb at the end, and I love to soar with her at the end, and she really does soar at the end. And as reactions to this, for me, has been a shock. You can probably, I'm blushing because I don't do attention. I don't do, I find it really difficult. So for me to step into a character has been a great shelter for me. And she allows me to tell this story and tell some of my own story in a very safe way, because some of it is my own trauma. But stepping into another character allows me to separate myself from that. And because there's fiction woven through the story too, that creates a further distance. So it allows me to tell the story and talk about the things that I want to talk about from a very, very safe distance, and to create that journey for others. And yeah, it's been amazing, the reaction. And it's been amazing to hear what different people have taken from the story. Sometimes people will shock me with what they take from it. So it's been a journey for me to accept that and to hold that.
Couldn't ask for a better exclamation than that. And it's perfectly timed because your torture is over. And now you just get to do your thing. So I'm gonna put myself on mute, and I'm just gonna let you do the thing that, as far as I'm concerned, you do best in the world.
Thank you.
So stage
Thank
is
you
yours, man.
Thank you so much, Stacey. So I'm going to start with really the first stanza. The show is made up of different poems and different stories. So I'm going to start with the first stanza that's in the show, and it's called Pockets. My father drank. And some of you may well be thinking, sure, listen, so did my own. But statistics tell me that there will be people in this room who understand exactly what I mean when I say, my father drank. My father drank the meals we should have eaten, the clothes we should have had on our backs. My father drank Christmases and birthdays and every last penny of my first Holy Communion money. My father drank. until he could no longer keep his demons in check. And he would say and do unthinkable things that he could never remember and we could never forget. My father drank. He would get his benefits on a Monday, leave my mother's housekeeping on the second-hand kitchen table because God forbid that he should place it in her hand. On Wednesdays, he would ask for half of a back. On Fridays, he would ask for the second half. On Saturdays, he would raid our piggy banks, and on Sundays, he would owe half the bar a pint. My father drank. As an adult looking back, I can only conclude that my mother raised us on air. But he would leave the house at 11 on a Saturday. And by lunchtime, the walls of the house had begun to breathe. By mid-afternoon, we had begun to breathe with it. My mother would pull out the record player, housed in a bright orange case, and we would play the Kinks and the Beatles and Elvis Presley. My sister and I would sing "When I'm 64," so loud our throats scratched. We would put on fluffy slippers that we knew slid on the tiled kitchen floor. God bless my mother. She did her best to teach us to jive. My mother bought cardigans from jumbo sales. She would rip out the wool and save the buttons, which meant we had the best button box in the whole of our street. She would reknit the wool into 10-centimeter squares. On Saturday afternoons, we would lay them on the tiled kitchen floor because later she would stitch them to make blankets for our beds. My mother ran the bath at 6:30. My sister and I sat in each other's grime. 7 o'clock, found us sat in front of a coal fire. As my mother wielded a fine metal comb through damp hair, root to tip in search of nits that she never found. And we would watch Morecambe and Wise, drink ginger cordial from wine glasses, eat heart-shaped sandwiches made with a cookie cutter and sliced oranges sprinkled with sugar. And my mother would watch Morecambe and Wise and read a Mills and Boon and hold a conversation and stitch our blankets and drink a cup of tea and smoke Players number 6, but all at the same damn time. At 6 and 8 years old, we had heard the battles that went on in our home. My father's words were already planted in my mind like primed grenades. And the wounds he inflicted on my mother were already teaching me to hold fire, to lie low. We had not yet seen the war, not yet been in the trenches, but in the war in which we were raised. My mother made pockets. Pockets where calloused hands on damp hair calmed the storms within us. Where fluffy slippers became blue suede shoes, where heart-shaped sandwiches were quite literally the best things from sliced bread. Where knitted squares of wool became more precious than rubies, more valuable than diamonds, and later she would drip these squares around our shoulders, say, "Night, night, close your eyes now. Shut tight." So we would close our eyes, shut tight, and we would wait on the war. And so Danielle, unfortunately, does become involved in the violence as she grows older. And at 12 years old, she goes to stay with a family friend. So I'll take the story up there again. 12 years old, went to stay with a lady called Sally and her 3 daughters. I had no idea why at the time. Aunt Pauline drove me there in her little Renault 5 campus. She dropped me off with a bag and she told me to behave. I see, my Aunt Pauline was my dad's sister. 1 year older, a whole foot smaller, but just as flippin' me. As if someone had taken all that rage and decided to make it pocket-sized, so I knew better than to ask questions. And Sally loved hard. She made you breakfast, sandwiches for school. She cooked your dinner. She washed all your clothes. Christ, she ran you a bath. I had no idea how to react to that. Where was the temper? Where was the snap that I was used to? I did not trust her. So I decided I would expose her. You see, in my world, nobody was that kind. Not really. So I lied. I stole. I cursed and I talked back. And when that didn't work, I went to her weakness. I went after her kids. The day she saw me hit her youngest, she stood with her mouth open like a wound. But she still didn't snap. She sat me down a few days later, though. She said she was sorry. Jesus, she was sorry. She said she had tried really hard, but that it was best for everyone if I didn't stay. She took my face in her hands. She kissed me on the top of the head and said, someday, Danya, you're gonna have to let somebody love you. And the way that she looked at me, that look, it was like standing in the full heat of the sun, arms stretched wide, head back, eyes closed, letting the warmth fill all your spaces. I was back home later that evening. My mum couldn't speak to me. She just shook her head and looked at me like I had hollered her out. In his absence, we didn't speak of it. The secret pushing at the walls of our house, making it impossible to breathe. My mother rocking in the corner, long since lost all sense of self and function, so it continued. His games, his rules, our hell. So as she grows older, she starts to fight back with her father. And there is an altercation when she is age 20 that lands her in hospital, and she doesn't settle in the shelter that she gets sent to. So she goes to the streets. So I'll pick it up for when she's in the streets. By November, Belfast was Baltic, but the Christmas shoppers were out in force already. My doorway stank of urine and whiskey and unknown things. I put my scarf up over my nose against the stench. I focused on breathing through my mouth. I watched shoppers who thought they were cold because they had to walk 10 minutes from the shopping centre to their air-conditioned 4x4. Trust me, they had never been cold. I mean, so cold your bones turned to steel, soldered together at the joints, making the slightest movement impossible. I mean, so cold that you don't drink after 4 o'clock because the thought of getting out of your sleeping bag at night for a wee makes you cry. Real actual tears. A lady bought me a coffee. Nice enough, I suppose. Until she said, I didn't want to give you money, love, in case you drank it. The only time I drank out there was my first week when I couldn't sleep. I woke up with a strange man's hands in my places and spaces. I have not drunk since. When I told Kelly, she gave me 8 nappy pins. He only groped me. I told her, I'm not pregnant. No, she said. And she pressed them into my pant. You fasten your t-shirt to your knickers, then your jumper to your jeans, then your coat to everything. It will give you time to scream, Danielle. Or if I know you, time to fight. Man crouches down and he puts a pound in my dish. Have you no people, love? I almost answer him. Almost say, yeah, mate, I've got people. Community outreach people, floating support worker people. Christ, it was so damn cold that night. A lady strode towards me with a North Face jacket, this Radley bag held just so, and she looked like she could afford it. So I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask her for change. I'd been out there for 5 months and I'd never asked. But there was £1.34 in my dish and it was 10 o'clock at night. So that was it. I was a real life beggar. I could fall no further. I'd watched others do this so many times. Can you spur some change? Can you spur some change? Yeah. Can you spur some change? See? More invisible with each plea, so it was my turn. No shame, no gain, but just as I was about to speak, she looked at me with utter disgust and said, no change. I couldn't help it. Humiliation exploded inside me. I never asked you, you stuck up cow. I huddled up inside my sleeping bag. I checked my nappy pins were in place and I closed my eyes. I heard somebody call my name, but I stayed where I was. The only person who called me Danielle out there was Kelly, and I could not be doing with her that night. Somebody grabbed my foot to my sleeping bag and shook it. And I was back there with Sally, shaking my foot through the duvet. Come on, Danielle. You're going to be late for school, love. And the memory winded me like a punch. I told myself it couldn't be, but I wanted it to be. God, so bad. I didn't breathe in case I broke the spell. I peered over my sleeping bag, and her brown hair was salted at the roots. She had these wrinkles on her cheeks, as intricate as spiders' webs. But it was my Sally, all right. Because as she looked at me, I swear that I could feel the heat of the sun. But that night, in Sally's house, she made it clear that I couldn't stay there. Her daughter was all grown up now. She was full of confidence, attitude, memory. The memory of me stealing her pocket money and smacking her hard across the face when she called me out. But my sorry got stuck. It turned to chalk in my mouth. It turned my cheeks scarlet. It followed me to bed that night. It turned the mattress into needles. I remember getting up at 4 a.m. to sleep on the floor, putting my shoes back in my feet so I could sleep because I missed the weight of them. And Sally was on the phone first thing, trying to find me somewhere else, anywhere else to go, and she found me a place. In a shelter for survivors of domestic violence. We drove there in silence. The unspoken words sucking the air from the car. Keep in touch, she said, but not like she meant it. I shared a room with a family, a kitchenette with another family. I slept with my money in my socks like I had done for 5 months. I got a protection order from my dad. Safely, a game of Jenga that could collapse at any given moment. It took 8 months to get a flat. This dingy, dark, damp hole of a flat with mold in the corners. But mine. A mattress on the floor and a sheet to act as curtains, but mine. I got a job as a carer in an old people's home and I saved so damn hard. I made a home in that crappy little flat. I kept it like a pin. And all the while, these old folk, though, the sheer unquestioning acceptance of them, it blindsided me. Turns out that kindness is so much easier to give than to accept. But I was learning, slowly. When someone frail trusts you, when they trust you to help them bathe, to help them eat, to help them with all the hidden intimacies of life, you begin to trust yourself a little bit. I was desperate to trust. I was terrified to trust. I would step towards people and back again. and towards them and back again. And these old folk, though, they let me dance this relationship hokey cokey because somehow, without ever being told, they knew I needed that. I kept secrets, lots of them. I found out that people have no idea how to hold your truth when it looks nothing like theirs. Words wounded easily, and I would pick at the scars. And any time that someone made me feel small, suddenly I was every child I had ever been at every age when I had ever felt small, and the other person had no idea that they were facing an army. And sometimes there were wars. And sometimes there were casualties. But always, I was sorry after. I bloody loved those old folk. I felt like I had 15 grannies and 17 granddads. I had my favourites too. Eccentric and unbelievably posh old ladies who wore bright red lipstick, ginger wigs, and far too much flippin' underwear. They filled their tiny rooms with books stacked on books stacked on books. They picked my brain for crossword answers while I made their beds, and they told me their world while I bathed them. They seemed to know by instinct to never ask about mine. Except for Owen, my Owen. At 87 years old, he was the oldest person that I had never met back then, and definitely the sweetest. And he was scrawny, with enough loose skin to know he hadn't always been. It would roll around his bones when you bathed him and pucker up and get in the way. He had no children. And he told me that was his biggest regret. That his sweetheart had married someone else while he was away at war. He had never found another. He'd never looked for another. He told me that story so many times. And each time he would drum his fingers on his thigh, as though loss had a rhythm. Sadness rounded his shoulders when he walked. He was sat on the loo the day it happened. I was putting socks on his bunioned feet. Do you see, because of that man, I still cannot stand feet. I asked him what was on the news that day. He never missed the news. His hand was so cold when it caught my cheek. It was the gentlest of taps. Twice. Tell me, he said. Tell you what? Any of it. All of it. Child dear, you are haunted. Some days you look like you've lived your life 100 times. So I told him. I sat on the edge of the bath. Him sat in the loo with his trousers puddled at his feet and a towel across his waist for modesty. And I told him. I told him about my dad and Sally. Miss Harvey, my teacher, telling me I could do anything. I told him about that night and Nurse Laura and being out there and Kelly. I told him I haven't seen my family in a year, but that I didn't care because they left me out there. He sat so still while I emptied out. He never took his eyes off me. He kept tearing up toilet tissue and handing it to me till there wasn't any left, and then he took a handkerchief from his pocket. I remember it was white, with burgundy checks at the corner. He handed it to me, saying, blow your nose and keep that. I don't want it back. And he winked. And that wink, the way it landed in me like cotton. Child dear, it's more than I thought, he said. I knew there was something, but that is more than I thought. But look at you, doing it all by yourself, and you are doing a great job. You're doing a great job taking care of you, and you're doing a great job taking care of me. Sure, you are marvelous, just marvelous altogether. Now wash your face in cold water there. And don't let anybody see that you've been crying. This stays between us, this young Danielle. Just between you and me. Big deep breath. That's a girl. Now tell me this. Are we getting these damn trousers up any time soon? My bits are freezing. He was sat on the edge of the bed the next day when I went in. He was still in his pajamas, his catheter bag bulging at his calf. Right, young Marvelous, says he. We need a plan. Oh, and I have no time for talking today. I still have 4 of you to get up for breakfast. Put the blame on me, he says, palms in the air like surrender. Tell that busybody boss of yours that I was grumpy. He rummaged a small black notebook from his bedside locker. He opened it at a blank page and wrote in capitals along the top, Plan for young Marvelous. What are you going to do with your life? He said. That Miss Harvey says you can do anything you want. You cannot stay here. Cohen sure told you. I have no examinations. I have nothing. Not a problem, says he. He turned back a page in the notebook. He tore it out and handed it to me, saying, those are the ones they do at the college. And those are the days and the times that they do them. I stick that in your pocket. And he was all pleased with himself, grinning so wide his damn ears nearly lifted. But Owen, I said, what if I can't do it? Oh, young Marvelous, trust me. I know you can. But later that night, bone tired from a 12-hour shift, I put my uniform in the boiler wash, and Owen's plan for young Marvelous disintegrated into mulch, and it let me off the hook for a little while. I spent so long believing that I wasn't capable of anything, so long hiding the truth of that from everyone, that trying to achieve anything at all felt like too much of a risk. And I lied to Owen. I choked the words through my thickened tongue. I told him the classes were all full when I checked. And I don't think he believed me. But he didn't push. Stacey, I'll leave it there if that's okay. That's me about 30 minutes.
I always forget to unmute myself. That was, oh my goodness, that was absolutely unbelievable.
Thank you.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
And I don't think, well, I don't know. I was about to say I'm not planning on making it over there anytime soon, but I'm supposed to be there in October. So maybe. We've got about 5 minutes. Talk about the book, because I know for those of you who don't know, who are watching this, Becoming the Marvelous started off as play, and it's now being put into book form. So talk to us just a little bit about that.
Sure. So when I was doing the shows up and down the UK, lots of times after the show, people would ask me, did I have a copy of the book, and they wanted to read it and to sit with it a little bit more. And I was really reluctant to put it into print because it didn't ever feel like it belonged in print. So I made the compromise. So the book is actually a script form of the play with stage directions in it. And so what that does is whenever I get to the time when I stop performing it and hopefully write something else and move on, it allows the story to live on, and someone else, if they want to pick up that story and move forward with it and to perform that story if they wish. Because I think the story has power. And so I'd like it to live beyond me if possible.
Is there any thought of an audiobook for an audio performance?
There has been thought. There hasn't been anything done about it yet. I've been chatting to a couple of studios even about getting it put onto a recording so that it will be available in maybe CD form or downloadable form. Because there are a lot of people who have expressed that to me, that they'd like to just listen to it rather than read it, just to hear the voice of Danielle. So yeah, I would be keen to do that. I'm actually just trying to get some funding to make that happen.
Now he said, we'll pray on that millionaire finding one of us.
Yeah.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, and the only other question that I have for you is, because this is a lot in just a few years' time. Between that and your work, because I remember reading the post during COVID. So first of all, thank you for everything you did during that time. But after all of this has hushed down a bit, what comes next?
Gosh, I haven't had time to draw a breath and think. Stacey, I'm going to be really honest. I haven't written anything new in probably about 8 months because the show is 11,000 words. And so that takes up so much space in my head that it's been really difficult to find room to be creative. So I'm actually looking forward to stepping back from it soon and to be able to see what comes out of the space that's created after that. Because there hasn't been anything able to be created while that's been such a current thing. It's been all consuming to have that. So we'll see. Watch this space.
And with that, I'm just going to say thank you again
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you
This
so
has
much.
been absolutely fantastic for me.
Thank you.
Whenever I get a chance to hear you do your thing, it is a banner day for me. So this has been absolutely perfect.
Bless
For the
you.
folks who are watching this, if you want to find out more about Becoming Marvelous or about Cathy, where can they get a hold of you?
Just find me on Facebook, or actually if you search Becoming Marvelous in Google, lots of stuff will come up. And there'll be probably in the future, the next couple of days, there'll be options to get the book and things just even found on Google. But you can find out more about the show, absolutely. You can read reviews and you can see more about it, but just by typing it into Google.
Wonderful. Cathy Carson, thank you so much. We are definitely going to see you one way or the other over the coming months. For everybody who's out there, who's watching this now, for Cathy, you yourself, I never bother with time zones because they give too much trouble. So I will just say, wherever it is you are in the world, watching this, experiencing this, first of all, fall to your knees and thank your lucky stars that you get to hear this sort of art. And secondly, take it light, take it easy, and we will see you somewhere around the way. Y'all take it all right.
Thank you so much, Stacey. You take good care. Bye-bye.